My name is Bo Knarström and I'm a battlefield archaeologist at the National Heritage Board in Sweden.
What are your last projects and the most important projects?
We're working on several projects simultaneously. We're working in Scandinavia and Sweden and as well as in other countries. I think the most important one, albeit very small project, is a World War II crash site in Sweden, Lancaster, crashing in 1944. Apart from that, we had contract archaeology for the first time in Sweden involving battlefield archaeology. So I worked for 6 months last summer on one battlefield alone.
Was the results there?
It's a major battle that was actually unknown. It's from 1678, and you would suspect that it would rank among the big battles in that war between Denmark and Sweden. But it's actually an unknown major battle. I suspect that since the war was over anyway, the Swede had already won, that it didn't attract the attention of the historians. But we discovered it by help of archaeology.
So you bring up the memory about this war, which is forgotten by, and you bring it up by archaeology.
The war is not forgotten. We have some of the bloodiest battle fought in Europe, on the Swedish soil in southern Sweden in this war. But major battles that took place have been forgotten. They are in the shadow of these very large-scale battles some years before. So we found that together with the farmstead that was razed to the ground also. So we have a close combat fighting in houses actually for the first time also.
The most battlefields you look for with battlefield archaeology are historical battles. So there exist historical sources. What is the new insight by the archaeology?
Well, we used to say in this international group working in Lützen, if you want to be sure not to find a battlefield, start looking around the monuments, because there you will never find the battlefield. You know, the visitor center and where people go to see battlefields usually is in the wrong place, and they have the same situation in the United States also. So archaeology fills up a very important function in the respect that we can actually go and look for the battlefield proper where it actually happened, and it rarely coincides with the historical references. And this is something that we have seen from time and time again. This is usually the case.
So battlefields are memorialized on one side, but they haven't take care on this side. They don't happen at the site normally.
No, because if you're going to transport, let's say in the 19th century, a big stone by horse and cart, you will usually place it in a crossroads where people pass, and you don't drag it out in the fields or in the woods. So they are memorial sites and important as monuments, but they are rarely erected at the sites of the battlefield proper. So what usually happens is that we find battlefields, but not in the areas where the ancient maps or the historical sources suggest they will be.
And how does battlefield archaeology works? What are you doing in the field?
We're doing lots of stuff actually. We are reading terrain. We are doing digital mapping, very important. You know, channelizing terrain features that would have led by necessity troops in certain directions. For instance, here in Lützen we found the bridge that Gustav Adolf II led his troops over the rivers. We found remains of the bridges, cobblestones. We do metal detecting as the most important instruments, and I would have to emphasize that in the Swedish team we only use professional archaeologists, and 10 times out of 10 that will produce a better results than using hobby detectors, or in some instances also looters as voluntary workforce.
When you talk about looters, is it necessary to protect battlefields?
Very much so. You will find on German eBay or American eBay or English eBay items that is stolen from battlefields. And I don't care if it's legal in the country, I still consider it stealing, and I still consider these people to be thieves of our common heritage.
What about the law in Sweden? Is it allowed to go with metal detectors as a looter over the fields, or is it prohibited?
It's prohibited, but there are strong forces now working for legislation to harmonize the Swedish laws with the European Union laws, which would mean that it would be much easier to either get a permit or no permit at all and go and do metal detecting.
What do you think about this?
I think it's ludicrous. It's not a human right to own a metal detector and go and loot. It's not everybody's business to do this. It's an archaeological.
So you think it should harmonize? Europe should harmonize with the Swedish law.
Yeah, and I think the Swedish law could be even more tight. But it's good the way it is now.
And you are in Lützen now as a Swedish archaeologist, and you participate on this Lützen project. What do you think about the Lützen project?
Well, I had this question today by a television team visiting the site, and they asked me the importance of Lützen as a battlefield, and I will say again now that it's not the importance of the battlefield itself, it's the importance of, for the first time, this is the first German battlefield project on an open-air battlefield from historical times, and it was organized as an international effort, and this is the first time also. And this is the major thing about this project, is the opportunity for European colleagues to come together and work together and share ideas and learn from each other. That's the main thing about this battlefield. It's not the battlefield itself. Although we're going to produce very many new finds and results and new ideas about what happened on this battlefield, the importance is still the cooperative project.
The community of the battlefield archaeologists is small, but it's growing up, you know.
Yeah.
And what is the history of battlefield archaeology, especially in Sweden? You know, because I think in Germany we are not in the same stage than you in Sweden. You are started earlier.
Well, I started the first battlefield project in 2003, actually. But the benefits that we had was that I employed professional archaeologists skilled in metal detecting. They are specialists. They are amongst the best in the world, some of them. And that's why we reached the results that we did. So many people want to go and do projects, but they don't have the funding for it. And they use the metal detecting communities and hobby detector clubs and so on to go and do the field work, and then you can never be sure of the result in the end. So again, I say 10 out of 10 you will have a better result with a smaller group of professional archaeologists using metal detectors than 100 hobby detectorists.
What about the public interest in Lützen, in Sweden itself?
About the battlefield?
Yes.
we have some iconic battlefields. Poltava, where we have worked in Ukraine, where the Swedish Empire effectively ceased to exist. It was a major Swedish loss. Is widely known by the public. And also Lützen ranks right up there with Poltava. So it's one of the battles that are known. Of course, the king was killed in this battle, so that's something of importance also.
What are your future projects? Where are you interested in? Where are your science interests are going?
I don't really know now. We are still working in some battlefields in Scandinavia, but I'm not that eager anymore to go hunt for battlefields for its own sake. I'm looking for cooperation abroad. And I think that one thing that we have to address is modern history, much more. World War I, World War II, which these are the remains that are effectively disappearing now because of looting. And in a few years, unless something is done, these memorials will be gone.
So in Germany there are a lot of looters in the World War II battlefields, and it's hard to say nothing happened, you know. Is it the same in Sweden?
We know for certain that some of the crash sites, we had 380 Allied and German planes crashing in Sweden during World War II. Forced landing, they are called. And we know for certain that some of these places have been looted by people with metal detectors, yeah. But I can say also you can just have a look on the internet auctions. You will find looted World War II material almost dominating some of these sites, especially from the eastern countries.
What about the public interest in battlefield archaeology in Sweden? Is there high public interest? Or?
Oh yes. The history of war studies in Sweden is, let's say 30 years ago, there was a small group of people, the Club of the Retired Colonels, who wrote about Swedish war history. And it didn't reach the public, and this was of course the universities, for political reasons, never touched upon the subject of war. And I think it had roots in the 1960s, where politics was a major issue. But since Peter Englund, the famous Swedish historian, wrote the book about Poltava in the 1980s, the academic corps started to study and publish military history and war history. And I think that Sweden now is one of the countries with the most production of literature and magazines and documentaries on war history. And the people taking part, reading these books and taking interest in the subject are no morons. They are ordinary people with a genuine interest of what happened. Because war is like the Greek dramas. You have love and death and you know, the ultimate drama. So that fascinates people. It's a very, very deep interest in Swedish public.
And what about the ethical aspect of battlefield archaeology? Battlefields are oft mythologized. They are used by politicians. For example, the Amselfeld is used by the Serb politicians, Milosevic.
You're quite right.
So, what is the ethical aspect? What can battlefield archaeology do to clear up?
That's a very clever question. In Sweden, because the academic world wouldn't touch upon war and war history, it was ideologized by right-wing groups in Sweden. So they claimed the war history for themselves because there was no academic research to counter what they were saying and how they used the history. Whereas now that we have both historian and archaeologists working with this and serving the public with the true facts, it's quite a different story. So we're effectively countering the right-wing groups in this. So that's very interesting.
It's possible to demythologize these stories about battlefields.
Yes, and as archaeologists, yes, and in some instances, we as archaeologists are more apt in doing research on war history because we are interested in details. Sometimes ridiculously interested in details, but also interested in the individual in perhaps another way than historians who likes, you know, the generalized picture. And we can produce pictures of these sites through artifacts picked up on the battlefield, showing that these are actually areas of human disaster. Time and time again. We have 2,500 major battlefields on the European continent from the 16th century and up to World War II. 2,500 battlefields where hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people died. So these are places of utter disaster that we are examining. And we produce pictures for the public of the true events on the battlefields. Not very nice ones, but true ones.
Because I think the most pictures we see, you know, in films and pictures like this, you know, these are heroic pictures, but battlefield archaeology tell us another story.
Yes, it does. Usually what you see is utter chaos on battlefields. You find the balls that have passed through man or beast. You find the weaponry, you find the devious contraptions that were used to actually slay your enemy. So, and as archaeologists, you do not shy away from telling these stories, what these were actually used for. The famous historian John Keegan, he has written about an encounter with a curator at the museum who was very, very proud of the weapons on display and the guns and the musket balls. And John Keegan told this curator what actually happened when you use this stuff, and he was appalled because he had never thought of the actual use of these instruments of death. So we find this sad remains on the battlefields of how they were used and what through in archaeology we have a history of using experiments because we don't have written sources for how the scrapers in the Stone Age worked and so on. So, and we are still doing the experiments, shooting with muskets, shooting with cannons, exploding hand grenades, and see what actually happens. And it's very nasty.
Thank you very much.